Hi class, this is Yareli. I will be talking about modern slavery, human trafficking in the U.S. Here's a definition of human trafficking from the United Nations. The act of trafficking includes recruitment, transport, transfer, harboring, and receipt of persons. This is done with through the means of threat or use of force, coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power or vulnerability, giving payments or benefits. And the purpose of trafficking is exploitation, including prostitution, sexual exploitation, forced labor, which I will be focusing on, slavery, or similar practices, removal of organs, or other types of exploitation. That is what human trafficking is. Labor trafficking in the United States. Labor traffickers include contractors and employers who use violence, threats, lies, debt bondage, and other forms of coercion to force people to work against their will in many different industries. In 2013, the National Human Trafficking Resource Center collected data collected data on human trafficking, and 929 reports of 929 reports of all trafficking cases were labor trafficking. That's only what was reported to them, so that made up over 17% of all cases reported, but these numbers are very low. It is very hard to get an accurate number. I think in 2013, what was actually estimated was that over 14,000 people in the U.S. were victims of human trafficking. And I'm just going to talk a little about why I chose to discuss this subject. I think lately we've heard a lot about sex trafficking, and I think it's worth kind of shedding a light on labor trafficking because a lot of the times these people are not identified as victims of trafficking. They're identified as immigrants, illegals, but not victims of trafficking. So I think it's important for people to open their eyes and really identify the issue. So who are the victims of labor trafficking? Often they have no immigration status. They are kept in poverty, isolation, and are in vulnerable situations. These people can include domestic servants, farm workers, factory workers, door-to-door sales crews, people who work on carnivals, and people who work in health and beauty services. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, the CIW. The CIW investigated and assisted in prosecuting over 12,000. They prosecuted traffickers who were holding farm workers, over 1,200 farm workers, against their will and making them work in tomato farms. The environment was violent. Many times these people were kept without working without pay. Their visas were held to keep them there. In 2011, the CIW launched the Fair Food Program, which was a groundbreaking model for a worker-driven social responsibility partnership amongst farm workers. This started in Florida with the tomato growers, and many stores and corporations have supported it, including Subway and Whole Foods and Walmart. The program, the FFP, conducts regular audits, and carries out ongoing complaint investigation and resolution. And I'll post the PowerPoint on the wall so you can take a look at the video if you'd like to. And the reason I chose to talk about this was because many years, well, in 2011, when there was a big movement for CIW, I participated in a way. What we did at school was collect signatures for a petition, and what the CIW was able to gain was that farm workers, each basket of tomatoes was paid 1 cent more than previously by all corporations, which actually doubled the farm workers' salary. So just with 1 cent, they were able to double their salary, which is a big deal, I think. Here's a sign, and this is a quote I took directly from the CIW website. Traffickers threatened the immigrants, held their identification documents, created debit accounts they couldn't repay, and hooked them on alcohol to keep them working. So that's one of the ways that people can hold their victims captive, and that's what happened to a lot of the farm workers. So the federal policy to address trafficking is the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, the TVPA. It focuses on 3 things: prosecution of perpetrators of trafficking, protection of victims, and prevention of trafficking. So when this federal law passed, the aim was to make it easier to prosecute traffickers and to give victims a chance. And some of the ways that this is done is by issuing them T visas or other visas that enable them to get back on their feet and stay in the U.S. as long as they participate in the prosecution. And some of the things done for prevention of trafficking are a lot of education. People in authority, including Border Patrol, cops, they're trained to look for human trafficking. So some of the issues in enforcing trafficking laws are that despite new and improved laws, trafficking is still a major problem in the U.S. Awareness and training efforts are still very minimal and concentrated in areas where trafficking is robust. However, trafficking affects the entire nation. The majority of victims are scared to come to report their traffickers. They have fear of being prosecuted for crimes they may have been coerced to commit, and they fear retaliation. There are many task forces throughout the U.S., and this shows a map of some of them. Well, there's 37 task forces to be exact, and there's 3 enhanced collaborative models in the U.S. One of the campaigns currently to end human trafficking is through NHTRC. These are some of their pictures for the campaign. How can social workers help? Basically being trained to know what are the things to look for, including multiple people living in a small space, people living with employers, people who are not able to speak with a social worker on their own, when employers hold identification documents. some evidence of people being controlled, inability to move, signs of battering, uh, submissive or fearful behavior, uh, people who are kept without pay, kept at their employment without pay, and people are who have arrived recently to the United States. And here is a list of some questions that you may be able to ask to find out if someone might be a victim of human trafficking. My recommendation to stop trafficking is that we purchase products that are fair trade, and we know that people are not harmed when creating them. This is a logo that you can find in some products that are created that are fair trade. Another thing is promoting education and promoting training on all levels. So from policy workers to the victims, low-level technology resources. A lot of the times these people are isolated, so it is important that this is not just like an online campaign. But the high-level technology is also important. And in my opinion, immigration reform would really help stop human trafficking, because many people who are victims are those who are here undocumented and are afraid to work for a legitimate business where they are aware of their rights. And here are some, I'll take some questions or comments. Go ahead and email me or post them on the wall. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.